Welcome back to Bold TV. I'm your host, Philip Michael. Now, let's talk about women in business with the editor-in-chief of Business Insider. Yes, the Business Insider, Allison Chantel. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
I'm
Thanks
so
so much for
excited.
having me.
I'm so excited to have you here. Now, there's so many things I want to talk about. Let's start with, again, the theme of women in business. You being a prominent business leader and a women in business. Bumble just went public earlier this year and making their founder a Whitney Hurd, Wolf Hurd, I think her name is, making her a billionaire in the process. But there's only been 20 women in history that have actually founded companies and brought it to an IPO. Why is that? And what are some of the stories that you've seen in your career in journalism that are sort of like that? And what is up with that trend?
Yeah, so first off, I'm really excited for Whitney. I actually covered her launch story in 2015 when
Did you?
she went through a really rough period. She was leaving Tinder as a co-founder and had been ousted after some sexual harassment allegations.
Wow.
And look at the comeback she's had. It's incredible. It's great to see her be one of these women breaking barriers. So I spent the last year looking into what are the barriers between entrepreneurship that are keeping women from scaling their entrepreneurship ventures to the same size as men. A lot has been talked about at the early venture capital stages, where if you look at all the women that flows from venture capital to all businesses, women-founded teams only get 3% of all those dollars. And when you think about BIPOC women and Latinx founders, it is much, much worse. It's about 0.67% of all venture capital dollars flow to them, so less than a percent. So we know from the earliest stages of founding a company that it's not quite fair. It's definitely not fair. And then when you look at the companies that have gone to the IPO stage, which is really what you need to get to if you even want to have a shot at becoming the next Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, one of the most successful people in the world, you need to reach that scale with your company. And we're finding that just so few women are able to get there. And so few BIPOC founders are able to get there. So we looked through thousands of publicly traded companies to see how many founders that were women have been able to achieve this milestone while retaining the CEO title, because that's important too. It's sometimes women get pushed out of the top job and pushed into a number two job, or some boss comes in and takes over. So we really wanted to see who was still a CEO at the time of IPO as well. We could only find 22 examples, Whitney Wolf being the latest one. And out of over 440 companies that went public last year in the US, only 4 women fit this criteria. So bad.
How do we change that?
Great question. I think there's a couple of different things. One is just there's a lot that women can't control. But one thing they can control is just being incredibly ambitious and aiming really, really high in their careers. I spoke to one of the 22 women. Her name is Julie Wainwright. She created the company, The Real Real, which is an online consignment shop. And she basically told me, look, women sometimes just don't aim high enough with their ideas. We're trying to found what we know, but really, Jeff Bezos knew nothing about books and nothing about online shopping really before he started Amazon. We need more women encouraged to think like that. And sometimes the venture capital model encourages women to found what they know as opposed to just thinking really big. So we need women to be really ambitious. We need them to think, I'm going to get as rich as I possibly can. I'm going to be as successful as I possibly can, and that will help the more women entering the space. But then, of course, we need the venture capital dollars to shift. Part of the problem is that there aren't enough women in venture capital with huge piles of money behind them in their funds. So I think about 13% of decision makers in VC are women. So ideally, we would see that change. And then you need just more and more of these women who do make it to pay it forward. And I think many want to, but one problem is that there's no PayPal mafia of sorts for women because so few women have achieved this milestone. This is something that Julie Wainwright was talking to me about. It's hard for her to fill her board with other powerful women because there just haven't been a lot of women who have gone through the experience of taking a company public. And so once we have more role models and we can kind of highlight those role models, then they can kind of pay it forward to the next generation.
You mentioned one critical component to this, and you talk about a very problematic statistic that we see in society. And things like this, again, help change it somewhat. There's still a lot more work to be done. Is there a way, if VC hasn't kept up or picked up with that need yet, or figured out how to address that, is there a way these founders can get around venture capital? Are you seeing something in your conversations with founders that are doing really well, getting alternative sources of funding? What are we seeing, and can they get around the VC if the VC dollars won't fund them?
It's a great question. think it's really hard to get to that sort of scale without having, I have really not seen many bootstrapped models or kind of alternative funding models that have gotten people to that point. You really do need, I mean, in some case, companies, Uber raised billions before it IPO'd,
Right.
And you don't get that really anywhere else. So I think you really do need to get the venture community, to get the big banks, to get everybody who can possibly fund you to this degree on board.
And one of those things, and again, a lot of times we have these unconscious biases, and maybe it's just a lack of relatability. You can speak as professionally as you want to, but you can't get around the fact that you're a human being. You may just only relate to somebody that you know knows the same things that you know. Now with e-commerce, social media, and stories like Whitney's coming out of Tinder, which is incredible, and founding Bumble, with what you see, with the people that you speak to on a daily basis and your network, do you think we'll see that number increase, meaning the percentage of VC dollars going to women, and more, in that horrible number of only 22, are we going to see more female founders take it all the way to the IPO level, some that people may not have heard about yet? What do you sort of see there, trend-wise?
I think that there's a lot of promising trends. And one is that, sort of somewhat sadly, there has been a little bit of a rocket ship hockey stick line of growth over last year.
Really?
If you look at the 22 companies, about 13 were founded, or 13 went public in the last 7 years.
Interesting.
So, in the last few years, there has been somewhat of a surge of those 22 companies.
Right.
So I'm hoping that the surge will continue. And certainly at the earlier stages, we've been looking at who could be next. There's a lot more women are founding what is called a unicorn company, which are these companies that reach billion or multi-billion-dollar valuations before they go public. And that's a good indicator of companies that will then eventually look public, and those signs are looking promising.
That's actually, see, this is what I was thinking. This is what I wanted to ask you, because those are sort of under the radar, but you know that they're unicorns, and you have the popular unicorns that probably get a lot of press and hype, or is more of a sexy product, if you will, that's more out there for people. It doesn't mean it's necessarily the best business model. Who are you seeing? Can you put some names on some companies, or maybe some founders, particularly women if you can, that are under the radar but could blow up in the next few years?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a company, Modern Health, that is founded by 2 women, and that company just received its unicorn status with a big round of financing that valued it at $1.7 billion. So there's a lot actually in the healthcare space that could meet this threshold. I think Jen Hyman at Rent the Runway is someone to keep an eye on. The pandemic has hit her business hard, but she is such a force that I don't see anything holding her back. There's a few people like that are on the cusp of really hitting this milestone as well.
So if you had to make a prediction, if you had to not bet money, but you get what I'm saying here, will the number of VC dollars, number one, go up to fund more female founders? And will that trend of the IPOs, women-led IPOs, will it go up over the next 5 to 10 years? Are we going to see that inflection point again, that hockey stick, and yet another one? What are we going to see? What do you think?
I do. I'm positive on it. I think we will see growth. I do worry that a lot of VCs and people who say they want to make this change and help are actually just a bunch of talk. There was kind of disturbing tweet I saw from an investor, Peter Pham, who said he's got a bunch of women in his portfolio that he was trying to help fundraise for. He reached out to 250 different investors about potentially funding their rounds, and basically crickets. There was a couple that responded to say hey, we would be interested in seeing, learning more about these companies. And so I do worry that to some extent it's a lot of talk, but I think there are signals that there will be positive change over time. We just need to keep pressing forward.
All right, so last thing before we wrap it up, any advice you can give, because you've had a meteoric rise yourself in the world of media since you came out of college to becoming the editor-in-chief of one of the most globally recognized media brands that are out there in existence. Any piece of advice, as again, media hasn't always been, that has something that was male-dominated from its inception. How did you rise there? What's some advice that you can give to people, or to women specifically, that are looking to rise in the ranks of management?
Yeah, a few things. When I was appointed in 2016 to be editor-in-chief of Business Insider, I think I was the only woman running a global business publication at the time, which was amazing. I think part of my success has been I got very fortunate to find a company and an industry on the ground floor that I was able to grow with and become an expert in faster than peers. So I was entering digital journalism right as it was being formed. There was like Huffington Post and there were
Yeah.
some blogs, but there really wasn't this surge of digital media companies yet. And Insider Inc. was on the forefront, and I managed to find it as employee number 6. And so it's not easy to scale with a company as it grows exponentially as Insider has. What if you can manage to hang on and make yourself valuable, and sort of roll with the punches and be up for having a bunch of different jobs and then figuring out where you can add the most value there? Your career could really rise, because you know the company extremely well, but then also I knew a new industry very well. So even better than peers who had been in journalism for decades, I was a foremost digital media expert, and that really helped me also obtain my seat. Plus hard work and reporting and all that other stuff that comes with journalism. But I think if you can find an opportunity that's in growth mode, that is a really important thing. And then you find a company that really values you, where you have bosses and mentors who value you, and you see that you're not at the ceiling yet, then you don't jump. Because I've certainly had opportunities to leave, but then I look around and I'm like, I got it pretty good.
Yeah.
This is a growing company. People support me here. Why would I leave?
Are you going to be one of the ones cutting the ribbons for an IPO? Are you guys going to do that? Am I asking hard-hitting questions here?
I'd love to someday fund them. Someday my retirement plan would be to fund some of these other women and help them do that. That would be amazing. So right now I'll cheer on the sidelines. I admire the people who do it. It is hard to run a business. It is not for sissies. That's for sure.
And this is probably some of the best advice that we've gotten, direct to the point. And I so appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining us, Allison.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
All right, you got it. And thank you all for watching. And make sure you follow Bold TV on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Have a great day. I'm out of here.